Well, let's return now to our main story. The questions being asked about the Health Secretary's relationship with and appointment of a close personal friend as his political aide. Joining us is Dr. Catherine Haddon. She's a senior fellow at the Institute for Government, describes herself as a Whitehall watching geek and a general constitutional agony aunt. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. Looking at what we know, what's being reported in the Sun newspaper and elsewhere, are there questions for Matt Hancock? Has he broken the rules?
In terms of the rules, I think the thing most people would be focused on today is the COVID rules. And obviously we saw resignations last year when people have broken the COVID rules in terms of contact and so forth. So I think that's something people will be very much focused on. I think it does pose bigger questions, though, about how the appointment of advisors happens in government. There's all sorts of different ways in which government can bring in people to be special advisors. In this case, also to put them on the board as a non-executive director. Some of those processes have very clear rules about them. Others, though, don't. And her appointment seems to have fallen into a quite murky area where there isn't a fair and transparent system, and we don't know the credentials of employments, and whether or not there's conflict of interest here.
So what we know about her appointment, we haven't got the documentation that would normally be expected, or we haven't seen the due process that is asked for in civil service codes. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So when a special advisor is put in place, there's a contract, there's a code of conduct for them. Their role is very much restricted. She's been described as firstly an unpaid advisor, so it doesn't seem to have fallen under that special advisor code of conduct. So it's not clear quite what the appointment process was there, who she was reporting to, and what she might have done in government, what reports she got access to, what meetings she went to, and so forth. It happens; those sorts of appointments do occur. Sometimes they're very useful, but there needs to be more transparency about that. And then there's the non-executive role. And normally these have been commercial people, but increasingly we're seeing more political appointments into this role. And if it is an advisory role to the minister, then it ought to be a special advisor role and not a sort of something that seems to be more of a grey area and not well regulated.
And it's being reported that was a paid role, that £15,000 would be paid for that role.
Yeah, that's right. She's not listed on the special advisor, so we don't think she's specific. That's a very specific role. There is a formal contract in place, and like I say, there's very clear rules that they can't direct public money or manage civil servants. So it sort of makes sure that what is a political role is well regulated. The unofficial advisor role, we've seen various of these used over the years. But they tend to be a bit more murky. We saw this with Lex Greensill, where officials were struggling to find the contract that employed him and work out exactly what access he had. Like I say, it could be that there's very good reasons for her appointment, that's, there was a sort of internal rules were followed, but it's more that this exposes a really tricky area in our management of people coming in to advise ministers, that we're not always sure what their reason for being there is. It's not regulated in the way that civil servants are, and therefore it sort of exposes the government to these sorts of accusations.
Is it a breach of the ministerial code to have sexual relations with an aide in general terms?
It's not in the UK Code of Conduct. The Australian Code of Conduct, which is mostly quite similar to ours, does have that after they had a scandal back in 2015. I think it is an interesting question whether advisors in this way, it brings up a conflict of interest. If she had been a special advisor, the only person responsible for her conduct would have been Matt Hancock as the person employing her. So it does suggest that that's a massive conflict of interest if you are the person employing them and then you're in a relationship with them. So I think it is something we need to look again at.
And do you think there should be a rule in the ministerial code against it?
I'm starting to think that we need to follow the Australian example and have it, yeah.
And just finally, these allegations are on the record. Who would we expect now to investigate those, if anyone?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that there'll be a ministerial code inquiry, though there could be, to see whether or not any aspects of it have been breached. It does talk about the importance of a minister making sure there's not the appearance of a conflict of interest, so it could be covered by that. I suspect some in government are trying to make sure, find out what happened, find out how she was employed, if nothing else, to answer the media's inquiries on this. So I don't think we will have heard the last of this today. I think it's going to rumble on as a question for Matt Hancock.
Dr. Catherine Haddon, thank you very much indeed for joining us.